Hello everyone, my name is DLA Graphical and welcome to the first episode of Game to Film, the video series that has me exploring any video game story and pitching how it could be translated from a video game to the film format. In this episode I am pitching to you how Halo Combat Evolved would make an exceptional movie. This will work on the basis of a reconstruction of the video game's narrative in order to have it be compatible in the film formula. I will be making many changes to the story of this game. I will be pitching to you my idea of this adaptation from beginning to the end. I will elaborate on what my changes to the story will accomplish, why they are necessary as compromises in the adaptation, whether it's what emotions they elicit, and how they will supplement and better the following parts of the story going forward. My language will be in such a way that implies that the movie I'm describing already exists. Meaning, instead of saying something could happen, I will say it does, as if you're reading a script. Now, if you are not convinced that video game movies in general could ever work, then refer to the prefacing initial video in this series, Game to Film Introduction, how video game movies adaptations will succeed. Little side note, said video is my dissertation from university turned into a video essay, and that got me through university with a 2-1. If that isn't validation, then I don't know what is. If you haven't seen it, be sure to hop back to it and tell me what you think of the thesis itself and any improvements I can make with this series going forward. That would be awesome and I'd really appreciate it. Depending on how acquainted you are with the Halo universe, you might be aware that the amount of lore in the Halo universe is overwhelmingly expansive, spanning across hundreds of thousands of years. Anyone would be hard pressed to pack it all into one movie adaptation of a singular Halo movie. Yet, the writers of the Game to Film adaptations have a tendency to try to do that to an excessive degree. This is one of the problems adaptations are plagued by. This is the antithesis, the polar opposite of relying on the audience already having prior knowledge of the lore and how anything in the universe works. This is something Halo 5 Guardians campaign suffered from. So let's take Halo Combat Evolved for example, and try to avoid the mistakes Halo 5 made, finding that balance of inviting the audience into the world and leaving them in the dark for as long as necessary. The iconic characterization of Master Chief and his history is tremendously dense in its mythology. Although he would be rather easy to cast, all you would need is a 7-foot man to don the suit and have the original voice actor reprise his role, instead of feeling the need to go through the process of finding someone who has a strong, superhuman-like stature and can also act, which isn't really commonplace. But the fact that Master Chief has his face concealed for the vast majority of his life is very convenient for the conundrum of casting. But I digress. I believe that in order to pull off a cohesive, coherent and complete movie adaptation, you need to find a middle ground between assuming the audience knows everything they need to going in, and bloating the script with unnecessary exposition that does nothing to spruce up or contextualize anything in the film at hand. I think this can be done by remembering what part of the lore is genuinely relevant in the storyline within Halo Combat Evolved. Among the vast astronomical events in the Halo lore, what comes into play in the story via cause and effect? If there are pieces of the lore that come into play in the story, introduce and inform the audience on that piece of information, using characters as a vehicle as they discover, for instance, the purpose and intent behind the construction of the Halo rings. It is a question of what the audience needs to know to allow them to be part of the journey in the same way our characters are. As such, with that general rule of thumb in mind, I will only be referencing and using parts of the lore when it is relevant for the story with my interpretation of how I think Halo Combat Evolved would work as a feature film under the new title of Halo, The Pillar of Autumn. Due to the scope of the Halo universe, there has been discourse on where the best place is to start adapting the Halo universe to TV or film. On Reddit, some fans believe that The Fall of Reach is the best place to start. Others would say that the better way to start would be to jump straight into the plot of Halo 2 and have Halo 1 and Installation 4 serve as a brief backstory. I would have to disagree with both. I believe that the best place is exactly where this franchise was born, the story that introduced you to the Halo rings and everything surrounding it. The Halo rings are the reason for any of the conflict between species and factions in the Halo universe. The Covenant have deemed the humans as heretics due to their petulant jealousy for the humans' blood relation with the Forerunners, the creators of the rings that the Covenant see as sacred, and they have built their religion around them. So naturally, the Covenant reacted maliciously when they realised their enemies have closer ties to their deities as they do. The UNSC and the Spartan program is instigated during humanity's civil war, but they end up combating the Covenant instead. The Flood's manifestation can only be stopped by firing the Halo rings. The Halos are the crux of the universe and act as both cause and correlation for everything that happens. If you introduce the audience to Halo with the fall of Reach, it would be unclear why the Galactic War is happening, and the only way you could delve into the Halo rings would be through tiresome exposition that deviates from the plot of Reach. You could frame it in a way where the Halo rings are not relevant to the fall of Reach, but I think it would work to its betterment if they were, as it would make the story's underlying context and lore unique to anything else out there. As well as that, thrusting the audience straight into the dense mythology presented in Halo 2 would give them neck-breaking whiplash, as they are being introduced to so many elements at once. You would have no time to really divulge thel vadam's failure to safeguard Halo, and what the Halos are besides, as Sergeant Johnson puts it. A giant hula hoop! I don't think you could fully comprehend the majesty and the larger-than-life significance of Halo, and why the Halo array matters. The beginning of Halo 1 is inviting to people who don't know what Halo is, evident by it being the way anyone was captivated by it in 2001. The plot summary is simple and gradually expands further. Humanity escapes the annihilation of one of their colonies. An alien fleet follows them. Through hyperspace, both races stumble upon a mysterious, archaic ring world. It is a race to find out what it is, for if it is a weapon, both sides could take advantage of it and win this galactic war, and from then on, the rest is history. On that note, let's do this. We open on planet Reach. The Covenant are setting human civilization ablaze. On the UNSC's space shipyard, amid a raging war and a desperate attempt for the humans to evacuate Reach, the Covenant are undergoing a vicious attack on the human colony. The UNSC have their infantry on the ground on their warcrafts airbound, resisting the hordes of Banshees, Phantoms and Scarabs. Noble Team, among many other Spartans, all suffer traumatic turmoil to defend mankind's last chance for survival. To avoid extinction, their vessel for evacuation is the Pillar of Autumn, a gargantuan cosmic ship, a warship to scour new ends of the universe and colonize planets or attack their foes. Right now, the airspace of Reach is littered with Pelicans and Hornets in a ruthless attrition with Banshees and Phantoms, as the Covenant pick off the remaining UNSC air support and infantry one by one. It's an absolute maelstrom, whirlwind in chaos. The Pillar of Autumn is stationary and docked as of yet, serving as the backdrop for a gritty, rigorous ground war between 30 Spartans and a platoon of UNSC Marines for every Spartan. But it's barely a fight, it's a massacre. The elites, the perfect adversary to the Spartans and their augmentations, outnumber the Spartans 10 to 1. In the scalding heat of this battle, the Spartans do everything they can to prohibit the Covenant from reaching the Pillar before it takes off. The Spartans and the inferior Marines display their valor and courage before their untimely demise. The UNSC are losing their warships and frigates by the second. A Spartan carries a mysterious artifact with a mission to get it off this condemned planet, along with the Pillar of Autumn.
Situation. Mother. We can get past this, sir.
No, you can't. Not without help.
Commander, you don't have the firepower.
I've got the math.
Solid copy. Hit him hard, boss.
You're on your own, Noble. Carter out.
The Spartans become more sacrificial, more desperate. On the ground, a Pelican lands on a helipad. The aircraft is approached by Noble 6. Noble 6 has a device in his hands, an artifact, something of vital importance. As if the situation isn't dire enough, a supercarrier warps into Reach's atmosphere. It primes its deadly plasma cannon and aims it directly at the Pillar of Autumn. I don't see any reason to change this particular scene, so here's what happens.
Good to see you, Spartan. Halsey assured me I could count on you.
Not just me, sir.
They'll be remembered. Cruiser, adjusting heading for the Autumn. Noble 4, I need fire on that cruiser or we're not getting out of here. Do you copy?
After that, Noble 6 devotes his life to the cause. He mans a gigantic Gauss cannon to destroy the Covenant cruiser before it has a chance to obliterate the Pillar of Autumn. The Pillar of Autumn's engines roar to life, and the monolithic warship takes off to abandon Reach, as the Covenant proceed with their invasion and evisceration of all human life on the surface. Any remaining UNSC personnel and evacuees of Planet Reach board the Pillar of Autumn as their last line of defense, with only one Spartan left on board, incapacitated from battle and recovering in cryogenic stasis. This is Spartan Sierra 117, John, unconscious, and unbeknownst to him, he is the last Spartan alive, or at least he is about to be. Noble 6 watches as the Pillar of Autumn leaves the atmosphere. He watches the result of his successful mission, knowing his inevitable demise will not be for nothing.
This is the Pillar of Autumn. We're away. The package is with us.
While I know that Halo 1 opens with the Pillar stumbling upon the Halo, I think it is important to show the audience how crucial the Pillar is for the survival of humanity, and what the Covenant are truly capable of. This opening shows that the UNSC are able to flee the invasion of Reach and avoid decimation with this warship, and it also foreshadows that the Pillar will be crucial to saving not only humanity, but all sentient life in the universe when it is used for that purpose at the end of the film. It is important then to establish what the Pillar of Autumn is capable of, as the engineering marvel it really is, and how quintessential it is for the survival of this exact moment and in the future. We also need to see for ourselves how desperate and dire the losing fight is for humanity, to justify and contextualize the Pillar's rush to leave Planet Reach, and what's truly at stake if the coordinates to Earth are attained by the Covenant. This prologue nicely transitions us into the story of Halo and Installation 4. The Pillar of Autumn warps in through slip space. This is when we are introduced to the cast of characters inside the Pillar. Captain Keyes inquires with urgency to Cortana concerning whether or not the Covenant have caught up to them. Unlucky for them, a Covenant fleet have followed them through slip space, and they are much faster than their ships. Keyes asks Cortana how much time they have. Cortana says their forces are sufficient to put up a fight. They have 90 seconds. Cortana tells him that she has detected an object. The navigator checks the interface and notices the first halo ring. Keyes is informed of the unidentified object. Then the halo reveals itself, as the Pillar peeks around a nearby planet. At this point we get a breathtaking view. The Pillar is adrift in space, taking in the majesty of the halo ring. The crew gawk at it in disbelief. Keyes asks for a sit rep. Cortana, the AI on board, explains that the Halo has an inhabitable atmosphere and terrain in its inner circumference, whereas the nearby planet lacks in oxygen. Keyes questions how she knows the name of it, and why Cortana brought the ship to these coordinates. Cortana tells him the answers to those questions are why she is important cargo, and why Noble 6, as part of Noble Team, brought her to the Pillar of Autumn. Answers they simply don't have time for. The pillar is struck by a Covenant cruiser. Whilst the bridge goes into combat alert, Cortana and Keyes agree to awaken Area 117 from cryogenic sleep, whether he is combat ready or not. 117 is calcified in his cryo chamber until he is awakened by 2 technicians. They frantically operate the terminal to bring the last Spartan into the fold to prepare for a Covenant attack. The pillar is attacked by a Covenant boarding party using an antimatter charge. The Covenant have breached the ship. Meanwhile, other personnel are fleeing the ship in Pelicans in order to land on the Halo as the warship has been compromised. We are then introduced to Sergeant Johnson rallying a platoon of Marines. Keyes instigates protocol of Article 2 and orders Cortana to be relinquished from the ship, as onboard AI is forbidden to be captured or destroyed by enemies. Captain Keyes commits to landing the Pillar of Autumn on the Halo ring himself. Keyes ejects Cortana's AI chip from the Autumn's infrastructure and orders his crew to get the chip to Area 117 at any cost. Meanwhile, Marines are in a firefight against Jackals, Grunts and Elites. They are about to be overrun. A plasma grenade sends a Marine flailing in the air along with his assault rifle. Injured on the ground, the Marine crawls to the assault rifle when it is picked up by none other than John, Area 117. The 7-foot-tall Spartan reinforced in leaf green armor engages his assault rifle and then takes out the Covenant forces with his augmented agility and strength. Then when that encounter is over, a Marine approaches 117 and hands over Cortana. She is his responsibility from now on. As John makes haste down a hallway, he implants Cortana's AI chip in his suit and connects her to the neural mainframe and combat systems in his suit. Before he knows it, Cortana is talking inside his head. Cortana and 117 get to know each other through a dialogue exchange as he strides down the hallway with an assault rifle, until Cortana refers to him with a title he has never been addressed by until now. Cortana says, "Chief, the Covenant is swarming the ship. We need to get to the life pods, abandon ship and set course for Halo's surface." 117 is stunned by what Cortana just called him. Cortana divulges sympathetically that the rest of the Spartans were wiped out on Reach, and he is the last Spartan alive, the last of Dr. Halsey's Spartan initiative, so by virtue of that, he has been deemed as the Master Chief. 117 takes this new title and verbal insignia to his dismay. The honour of the new rank is overwhelming to him at first, but he snaps out of it and carries on. After combating more of the Covenant, Chief leads Marines to the escape pods and helps them inside.
Now would be a very good time to leave.
Punch it.
Aye, sir. We're disengaged, going for minimum safe distance.
We're gonna make it, aren't we, sir? I don't want to die out here.
Look!
What is that thing, Lieutenant?
Hell if I know, but we're landing on it.
You're on him! She's been hit!
I knew it. The Autumn's accelerating. Keyes is going in manual.
Heads up, everyone, this is it. We're entering the ring's atmosphere in 5.
You sure you wouldn't rather take a seat?
We'll be fine.
If I still had fingers, they'd be crossed.
Now, regarding my choice to have John only get his title of Master Chief Petty Officer by virtue of him being the only Spartan in the ranks left alive, for the purpose of establishing who the main protagonist is, I believe I have injected Master Chief's arc with an instant beginning of a reluctance to the call, if you will. The responsibility of being the only superhuman soldier has been bestowed upon him, whether he was ready for it or not. Throughout his arc, he will become worthy and earn the title of Master Chief by fulfilling the duties, drowning the guilt he feels for not having earned the ranks as any other Spartan would have to. The contrast between John's life as a part of a team and him now being a solo legend relied upon by humanity will be jarring for John in this instance, disorientating, and it may overwhelm him despite him hiding it. So what exactly does this adjustment achieve? Well, so far on a base level, we can understand that Master Chief, a character who was a faceless empty vessel for the player to fill in the video game counterpart, is now a character who is feeling a sense of responsibility, honour, reluctance, anxiety, sorrow and guilt, all at once in the mere seconds he remains still, letting all that sink in, everything Cortana has told him. This news is broken to 117 amidst the mayhem of the Covenant's attack, but because John 117 is after all a dutiful soldier, he will put his emotions and psyche aside for the mission at hand, the evacuation of Cortana. Cortana holds intelligence vital for the human war effort. All in all, we briefly delve into the mind of John and can identify and relate to him. He has a very human yet assiduous reaction to being told that the survival of his species is dependent on him. In this interpretation, Master Chief is by no means stoic and emotionless at the notion of all his Spartan comrades having died, and him being the sole operational force that will or won't manage to save humanity and be the victor in this war. What this also achieves is explaining the significance of the rank of Master Chief, since even John 117, a menacing, intimidating, combative super soldier, is daunted by the gesture of being referred to as Master Chief. When there is so much action transpiring around him, and we only have known Master Chief for a few minutes at this point in the film, I think this is the most we can tell our audience without breaking the pace of the evacuation set piece on the Pillar of Autumn. The life pod, containing Chief and a squad of Marines, scorches through Halo's artificial atmosphere ablaze. The pilot descends the pod down to a mountainous plateau, the closest part of the terrain the pilot can lock a safe trajectory for landing. Unfortunately, the atmosphere for the Halo is unpredictable. The life pod yields to the pressure, and the pilot loses control, causing them to fall dangerously fast to the surface. With Chief and the Marines bracing for impact, the pod does not land, it violently crashes. Once the dust has settled after the pod's collision, a severely injured Marine, dazed by the impact, opens the life pod's hatch and stumbles, dragging his feet across the ground. Chief awakens, his armour is signalling his depleted shields, as we get a glimpse of his heads-up display, through which we see that Chief is the only survivor of the crash. The Marines' lifeless bodies remain in their seats, buckled up, but the brute force trauma of the crash was too much. Chief notices the injured Marine trudging outside. He briskly exits the life pod and sees to the injured Marine. The Marine collapses to the ground in hyperventilation. Chief checks on him and orders Cortana to run a diagnostic and x-ray. Chief reassures the Marine that he will be okay, and commands him to stay with him and to not lose consciousness. Cortana tells Chief the Marine has a collapsed lung, and there is no saving him. He's not going to make it. Ignoring Cortana's hard truth, Chief remains cradling the Marine's head until the life in the Marine's eyes fades away. Cortana shows her sympathy. Chief lets the body go defeated and demoralized. John is already failing in his new position. Cortana informs with urgency that the pillar is inbound. We see Chief turn to the skies. In the reflection of his visor, we see the curvature of the Halo and the Pillar of Autumn plunging downwards to the terrain. Master Chief witnesses the pillar's descent with shock and awe. Cortana asserts that they will need to know the pillar's trajectory, so they know where the crash site will be. Chief sprints to a cliffside in an attempt to scale it. His suit's jetpack sparks up, but it malfunctions. Damaged in the crash, it won't work. Chief manually scales the cliff to get a high vantage point to see where the pillar is crashing, but it disappears behind the skyline, where the mountains conceal the impact of the crash. As Chief is fixated on the horizon, Cortana alerts him of a Covenant warship inbound on his position. What follows from here is a high-octane action scene that exhibits the agility, strength, and the superiority of the Spartan in Master Chief's blood. He eliminates the Covenant troops, including a grunt on a ghost. After he has commandeered the ghost, he sets course for the crash site of the pillar. Cortana suggests that he finds the rest of the life pods on the way, and secure the Marines and support them. Chief accepts the order, then searches the environment for the Marines and Sergeant Johnson. Miles ahead, a phantom closes in on the Pillar of Autumn. Inside this phantom is an armada of Covenant consisting of grunts, jackals, and an elite named Thel Vadam, otherwise known by his eventual title when he takes on the mantle of the Arbiter. That's right, this is the most significant change I will be making to the story of Halo Combat Evolved for this adaptation. I believe that putting the Arbiter into this story of Halo 1 will reinforce and spruce up the story with a plentiful set of narrative beats and conflict to work with. Allow me to explain. First off, the absence of the Arbiter, or at this point in time, thel Vadam, was something of a missed opportunity in the story of Halo Combat Evolved. I think that he should have been there in hindsight. My reason being, when Thel is made an example of and punished for his colossal failure to safeguard Installation 4 in the opening of Halo 2, that moment would have been more impactful if we witnessed the true rampant and desperate struggle Thel went through in his fight to prevent Chief from destroying Installation 4. Thus, if we were to get a sequel to this, the scene of his punishment in Halo 2 would elicit more emotion, as we would understand the inhumanity and injustice of Thel being punished for doing everything he could when the situation was out of his grasp. In the grand scheme of the Halo universe, that's how I think this decision is beneficial. However, this leaves the question of how this emphasises the conflict and realises the potential beats within the confines of Halo the Pillar of Autumn, this film. Well, for one, the story will actually have a clear sense of conflict, with a tangible antagonist for Master Chief to overcome. The addition of the Arbiter, formerly known as thel Vadam, will be integral to the adaptation of this story, and his presence will elevate scenes going forward. This part has laid the groundwork and set up for the story to accelerate into the ethos of the Halo rings, the animosity between Master Chief and the Arbiter, and the fear of the unknown forces of death and misery. Stay tuned for all that in the following parts to this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in part 2. Hello everyone, my name is thel Graphical, and welcome to part 2 of my adaptation of Halo Combat Evolved, translated to film. I won't waste your time with a full recap. All I'll say is, if you haven't, check out part 1 and come right back here. We left off with the introduction of thel Vadam, the Arbiter, as I was explaining why implementing him into the story is advantageous for the sense of personal conflict between the film's portrayal of protagonist and antagonist. I recognise that there is still some conflict in Halo Combat Evolved already, with 343 Guilty Spark, but he only becomes a villain in the game once his ulterior motive is revealed and the true purpose of the Halo array is demystified. Not to mention he only appears much later in the video game. Given this, I still want to capture and sustain the sense of wonder and caution in Halo 1 that comes from the suspicious nature and demeanour of 343 Guilty Spark from the moment Master Chief meets him. The way you never know what the robot is thinking is effective, as it constantly keeps you wondering if he is on your side or not. But you, Master Chief, nevertheless trust him as a means to an end. My focus going forward is to introduce more conflict into the story, which should in turn treat the film with more things to happen in general, to keep the pace going and deliver momentum. I'd like to point out that I know Master Chief does clash with Zuka Zamamimi in extended canon, who appears to be an elite Master Chief clashes with after evading Reach, but I'm omitting that dynamic from the plot to hone in on the conflict between Chief and Arbiter in order to make their chemistry, history and eventual camaraderie layered and resonant going forward. I need to do that and ensure I do not compromise the part 343 Guilty Spark has played in the game's story. My addition of the Arbiter will have a ripple effect on the story going forward, so let's see where this goes. Also, important side note, I'm going to refer to Thel as the Arbiter, despite him not helming that mantle at this point in the story. I'm doing so for simplicity's sake, as it would appear not as many people know the Arbiter's previous name as you might think. So, we know Captain Keyes was captured by the Covenant in the game, but now since we are using the Arbiter, we have some tools to work with here, and some forgery to undertake. The Arbiter arrives inside the Pillar of Autumn with his backup of other elites. After meticulously searching the entire ship, we jump cut to him discovering the way to the bridge and the control room. The Arbiter breaches through, and is welcomed by suppressive fire from Keyes with a UNSC standard SMG. Keyes manages to neutralise a few inconsequential grunts and jackals before he is subdued by the Arbiter. The Arbiter demands access to the Pillar of Autumn's neural AI that contains an archive of UNSC intelligence, aka Cortana. Captain Keyes denies him access and tells him Cortana isn't here with a smirk on his face. The Arbiter asks where she is. Keyes wouldn't tell him even if he did know. He would deign to let the Covenant know the coordinates to Earth and glass it like they did to Reach. The Arbiter mocks him in saying that the fall of Earth is inevitable, just like the fall of Reach was. He tells Keyes he can delay the inevitable all he likes. The Arbiter then captures Keyes, as he knows that he knows the coordinates to Earth, because how couldn't he? It's among the last colonies humanity has left. The Arbiter scornfully points out. The Arbiter brutalizes Captain Keyes, forcing him onto his Phantom. Then the Arbiter sets course for the Covenant ship, Truth and Reconciliation, with Keyes as his prisoner. At this point in time, we cut to an establishing shot of a deep valley engraved into the crust of Halo's surface. In the valley resides a forest periphery that surrounds a tall, hyper-futuristic looking structure. This structure is a Forerunner beam emitter, exactly like the one you defend waves of Covenant in the video game. The beam emitter shoots an uncertain turquoise beam of energy up into the centre of the ring. At the base of this structure, several Marines are positioned on the ground, using the cover the elevated platform provides. Some of them are injured and having bandages dressed on them by medical officers. A Marine is scouting the area for hostiles in the forest and the edges of the cliffs. The group of survivors is led by Sergeant Johnson. Johnson orders the Marines to keep their eyes peeled. The humans are insulting the Covenant just by breathing Halo's air. From afar, we observe the valley surrounded by the dense forest and rigid cliffs. Then, a figure seeps into the foreground. It's a jackal, wielding a beam rifle. The jackal stealthily aims its sight and locks onto its target, Sergeant Johnson. Johnson is blissfully unaware of the hidden jackal in position. The vibe goes quiet, foreboding. The situation is about to turn dire. An invisible elite leaps at Johnson before it is shot with a beam rifle from the distance. Johnson is fraught. He turns to the dead elite on the ground, then turns back to where the shot came from. Master Chief is now holding the beam rifle, with the jackal it belonged to, behind him, eliminated. Johnson smirks at the sight of Master Chief in the distance. Johnson yells,
Get tactical, Marines!
What follows is a firefight with Chief, Johnson and the Marines facing off against a battalion of Covenant forces, deployed from a multitude of Phantom dropships. This battle of attrition makes it clear that Sergeant Johnson absolutely would not have survived the encounter were it not for the arrival of Chief. Chief takes down the vast majority of the Covenant, fending them off from the injured Marines. This scene will cement the notion that there is a lot of weight on Master Chief's shoulders, even for his stature. The battle comes to an end with the humans having prevailed thanks to Master Chief. The Marines show their gratitude and admiration towards him for saving them, which only overwhelms Chief in his internal struggle of responsibility. The Marines lick their wounds afflicted upon them in battle. Johnson operates a radio to call for backup, and Master Chief takes a breather and sits on a rock. He takes in his environment. He watches the Marines. He sees the terrain and the overarching halo curving over their heads. At which point Cortana chimes in on his train of thought, as if her neural connection with Chief allows her to read his very thoughts, feelings, ideologies and inhibitions. Cortana tells Chief it was always supposed to be him. Chief is perturbed by that ambiguous notion. Cortana elaborates. Among all the candidates for the Spartan 2 program, she saw something in him, something no one else had but John. Luck. Chief denies that whilst looking at all the Marines. He says he doesn't consider this luck. Cortana queries back, a burden? Chief simply says, duty. He then questions how Cortana knows anything about him or the Spartan program. Cortana proclaims that, for all intents and purposes, she is Dr. Halsey. Her AI construct and memory archive is a replica of Dr. Halsey to a T, in order to preserve her UNSC intelligence and perception in the event of her death. Cortana tells Chief that if he actually saw her embodiment, he'd be the wiser. Chief replies that he'll just have to take her word on that. To which Cortana says, "Are you sure?" Suddenly, Chief's mind and consciousness is transported into a binary simulated void, a digitized landscape of nothingness, save for Master Chief and Cortana. If you recall, in Halo 4, Chief and Cortana converse in this simulation at the end of the game. The reason I am using the simulation for this scene is that I will use it as a pigeonhole to show, not tell, some relevant backstory to 117, mainly the nature of the harsh experiments he was a part of, the tampering with nature that was under the jurisdiction of no one but Dr. Halsey, and her neurosis, her obsession with force and evolution to be amplified in the human body. Chief questions what the simulation is as he inspects Cortana's appearance. She reassures him that it's merely a simulation, and he can exit just by thinking. Cortana says that Halsey made the construct to mirror herself, to remind everyone that she was the one who pioneered the Spartan program in the event of her potential demise. Chief says, "Her demise? I thought you were her." Cortana humorously gets confused and says she tries not to think about it too much to refrain from an existential crisis. Chief asks if she remembers what she did to the other children during the early stages of the program. Cortana remorsefully admits she remembers everything. During this discourse concerning the grim origins of the Spartan program, we see children being taken away from their homes, then being replaced by clones in secret. Clones that die within 2 days, leaving only trauma for the parents, followed by imagery of dozens and dozens of failed biological enhancing tests, resulting in the deaths of adolescent subjects. These holographic visual cues serve as the background behind Chief and Cortana. Cortana reminisces about the botched clones that replaced the stolen children in their youth to be subjects in the Spartan program, when the operation was still considered as clandestine. She remembers all the casualties of the malpractice of superhuman biological augmentation, and the brave cadets lost along the way. As she refers to the dark past, we get visual representations as the backdrop. After a moment of silence, Master Chief bitterly utters, "A means to an end." Cortana echoes it, "A means to an end," to finish the fight. The fight against the Covenant. Then, Chief comes back to reality. Sergeant Johnson beckons Chief. He tells them they have backup on the way. A UNSC Pelican lands a Warthog at their feet, a militarized 4x4 vehicle. Forehammer, a female pilot, emerges from the Warthog and tells Chief that she saw a phantom leave in the Pillar of Autumn with Captain Keyes as a prisoner. Cortana says they must rescue Keyes before he yields to the torture and gives them the coordinates to Earth, or dies with his stubborn honour. Johnson suggests hauling ass over to the Truth and Reconciliation with the Pelican. Master Chief says they will see us coming in a Pelican. It's better to take the Warthog there and gain entry with a low profile. Forehammer says Master Chief is right, and that she takes it as an honour to meet someone who speaks her language. Common sense. Johnson gives Chief a UNSC sniper rifle to replace his beam rifle, and tells him to represent. The sniper rifle makes up for its weight in its caliber, and that the weight doesn't seem like it's going to be a problem for Master Chief. Johnson rounds up the rest of the Marines, then the squad drives off in Warhogs in search for truth and reconciliation. We return to the Arbiter on board Truth and Reconciliation with his prisoner, Captain Keyes. Keyes is restrained with a plasma-powered anti-gravity machine that is locking his body in place. The Arbiter demands to know the coordinates to Earth, so that the heretics can get what is due to them. Keyes reminds him he is asking an honourable captain of the UNSC to put all of humanity in jeopardy. It's gonna take far more than this to get it out of him, and if the interrogation and torture ends in his death, then so be it. He will never let what happened to Reach happen to Earth. He warns the Arbiter not to get on the wrong side of him. He could order the destruction of this relic that he worships so curiously. The Arbiter flinches and utters that the Halo rings are sacred. Keyes tells him, as was Reach, and all the life on it. The Arbiter murmurs, extinction is merciful when done fast. Keyes goes Ashen at that uncertain remark. Keyes says, what is life if it is lived by those words? The Arbiter scowls at him. Keyes insults him by saying his loyalty to the Covenant is unfounded, based on blind religion and envy for their ancestral connection with the Forerunners. Keyes would sooner die than yield to the malice of false prophets. The Arbiter musters his next words with fury. He tells Keyes his screams in anguish will tell him otherwise. The Arbiter ignites his energy sword and edges it closer to Keyes' face. He grazes him in the naked face, singeing away his skin layer by layer, paw by paw. Keyes grumbles and whimpers, resisting the pain. The Arbiter reaffirms his question, where is Earth, heretic? At night, Master Chief leads a squad of Marines stealthily across a cliffside path, leading to the Covenant ship. The Truth and Reconciliation poises above, as Sentry forces guard the gravitational lift that grants one entry to the ship. The Arbiter is told by another elite, a lieutenant, a rank known as Zealots, that their ship is being attacked by the UNSC. The Arbiter is referred to by his current rank, Shipmaster. He orders Keyes to be thrown in a shield cell. Keyes asks him why he is breaking such a sweat. Keyes wittily but suspiciously suggests that they are weak in numbers because most of the Covenant are busy doing something elsewhere on the Halo, finding something. He is trying to decipher what the Covenant are really up to, and why the Halo is important to them in actuality. Captain Keyes is then imprisoned in a shield cell. The Arbiter makes his way through the ship, and then orders the deployment of hunters. Beneath Truth and Reconciliation, in the chaos of a firefight between Chief, Marines, and a battalion of Covenant infantry, they skirmish for access to the gravitational lift. This action set piece will be similar to the encounter in the video game. After the humans have defeated the initial wave of safeguarding units, Master Chief approaches the lift. Master Chief has a bad feeling. That seemed way too easy. Sure enough, two hunters descend down the lift with the Arbiter, and this is where Master Chief will meet the Arbiter. This is the beginning of the conflict that puts them at odds with each other. The conflict that integrates the friction between them in Halo 2, and what creates the terms and circumstances for their eventual camaraderie in Halo 3. The Arbiter descends to the ground accompanied by the two hunters who are following their supreme commander, thel. Master Chief comments on his lack of backup. Cortana warns Chief that this is the shipmaster that ordered his fleet to follow the Pillar of Autumn from Reach. The Arbiter says that even with humanity's desperate attempt to distort their genes into something formidable, all it takes is one Covenant elite to strike down a Spartan, and the wrath of a single ship to glass their entire planet. The Arbiter introduces them to the hunters, then ascends back into his ship to leave them with the devastation to ensue, at the peril of the hunters. From here, we get a short-lived but rigorous battle with Chief, Sergeant Johnson, and the Marines skirmishing against the two hunters, with some additional elites. Johnson takes down some of the elites with a sniper rifle, Meanwhile, Chief takes on two hunters head-on. He utilises his combat ingenuity and dexterity to eliminate both the hunters. He doesn't make it look easy, just proficient. Also, quick side note, maybe let's not have the hunters have a massive gaping weak spot in the back of their armour, like in the game. It would be a bit anticlimactic if Chief just boop, pistol whipped them in the back. Or sniper rifle whipped them in the back. I'm trying my best to have what I say match up to what's on screen, so shut up. When that's over, they waste no time and ascend into the ship with immediacy. Before they gain entry, however, the Arbiter and his zealots abscond from the ship in Banshees to go elsewhere on the Halo Ring. When his zealots question his choice to leave Keyes behind, he asserts that the heretics will not matter if they find what they're looking for on this relic. They have matters to attend to. Master Chief obliterates his way through the Covenant to get to the prison cells where Keyes is being held. Once Chief has rescued Keyes, this is where we get a change of pace in the story, and the plot moves forward into new territory. This is where we begin to delve into the ethos of the Halo Ring, particularly Installation 4, the ring they currently stand on. Keyes points out that the amount of forces present on this ship is demonstrably scarce, as if they are spread out too thin. On reach, each of these warships housed thousands of troops, begging the question of where they are now. It's insinuated to Master Chief that something doesn't feel right. From their coincidental slip-space jump to the Halo Ring, to the Covenant's apparent vested interest and occupancy with what they call the relic. Then Cortana's voice emanates from Master Chief's suit, for Keyes to hear. Cortana admits that the coordinates she sent to the Pillar of Autumn were not random. The coordinates were obtained from a Forerunner artifact in Dr. Halsey's possession. Cortana figured if they were to go anywhere, she thought why not here, in case they found something invaluable to the war effort against the Covenant. Keyes questions if they did. Cortana gets Chief to hook her up to the ship's Battle.net mainframe, so she can gather intelligence on what the Covenant know of the Halo. Cortana then divulges that, in accordance with the Covenant's prophecy on the Halo Rings, they believe it to contain some form of weapon. Keyes echoes what the Arbiter said to him: extinction is merciful when done fast. Chief tells Keyes that the Arbiter seemed evasive, as if he has other priorities. Keyes reckons that the Arbiter has abandoned the ship in search of Halo's weapon with the rest of the Covenant. Cortana eventually states that she has deciphered messages regarding Covenant search and excavation teams all around the Halo. Cortana then triangulates the location of two Covenant excavation sites. Points of intrigue the Covenant found via a seismic scan. The first is where the control center for Installation 4 will turn out to be. This is located in a winterized snow biome on the Halo, where there is a Forerunner underground circuit of abandoned age-old structures. The second excavation site is in a swamp, woodland-type environment, with deep fissures and ravines. There resides another piece of mysterious Forerunner architecture that would appear to be a weapons cache. As it turns out in the game, however, this is where the parasitic flood infestation is being contained in stasis. Due to the fact that the Covenant could find the Halo's control panel at any minute, they need to make haste in making a decision, and because time is not on their side, they decide to divide their forces. Master Chief and Cortana expedite the excavation site in the snow biomes of the Halo, whilst Keyes elects to lead and head to the Forerunner storage facility in the swamps, the weapons cache, backed up by multiple squads of Marines and Sergeant Johnson. This is an even divide, because after all, Master Chief is a one-man army. As great of a mission I think it is, for this film adaptation I am completely skipping the silent cartographer. As a level in a video game, it serves and fulfills the purpose of providing the player with a challenge, but in terms of story, nothing much really transpires, or at least not enough for a particular escapade of flying to an entirely new island, fighting the Covenant, searching an underground base, finding a map, and fighting the way back out to be picked up by Thorhammer and a Pelican. I mean, sure, the map is how Master Chief finds the control center, allowing the plot to move forward, but I've simply made an adjustment to make the Covenant seismic scan to be systematically efficient to a degree where they have determined the most likely candidates for a room which the control center might be, in terms of complexity and most importantly, security of the Forerunner architecture. And since Cortana accumulates this information, the humans would therefore know where to go. Rest assured, this alteration will not dramatically change the sequence of events. It'll just help us get the plot moving along much faster and keep the story interesting, with less of a long-winded interval between each narrative revelation or inciting incident that leads to the next through cause and effect. Halo Combat Evolved story drags on a bit in favour of its gameplay elements, so as a film adaptation, this omission is absolutely necessary. Back to it. Forehammer flies the Pelican to the underground control room with Chief on board. In accordance with the game, Forehammer drops Chief deep into the Forerunner chasm that leads them to the tunnels to the Halo control center. But remember, Chief and Cortana do not know this at this point. Chief covertly takes on the Covenant troops who were guarding the entrance as he makes his way to the Halo control center. After that, we cut further into the tunnels, ahead of Master Chief near the control center. The Covenant are trying to scorch the Forerunner doors open one by one, as the tunnels we're on is in lockdown. As they make progress down the wide, spacious tunnels, an elite summons thel vadam, the Arbiter, on a communication device. To clarify, the Arbiter is on the other end of the frequency, where he will eventually encounter the Flood. The elite on screen is a different one. This elite asks for an update on the other excavation process. Master Chief has reached them at this point. From a distance, he is taking cover behind a pillar, eavesdropping on the conversation, at which point we cut to the Arbiter, with his excavation team, in the Forerunner weapons cache. We intercut to the Arbiter on the other end of the frequency. He reports that they have found nothing yet. He tells the other elite on the other end to stay vigilant for the heretics, our Master Chief. In the swamps, Keyes and the Marines push forward and enter the structure. What follows is a firefight in an atrium-like area with a high ceiling. The Arbiter is alarmed and calls for his Zealot lieutenants to assist in the fight, leaving engineers behind to fight open the remaining door. Plasma and battle rifles are shot across the room, making for a blazing light show in the atrium. During the gunfight, the Covenant have managed to blast through the final door. This is when the Covenant accidentally awakens the Flood. This could happen in such a way where the Covenant's controlled demolition disturbs the foundation of the Forerunner structure, and therefore compromises the security and stability of the containment room that is storing and preserving the bacteria organism known as the Flood. Perhaps we could have a scene not unlike the overly curious and equally moronic scientists in Prometheus, but instead of toying with the organism, they are so enamored with the organism that they assume it is purely a weapon just waiting to be used, further justifying it, as the Covenant are after all being attacked at this very moment. Due to that misinformation, however, they release it at their peril. Or we could even have a scene that includes the engineers from Halo 3 ODST. In this scene, we could introduce a faction of the Covenant that function as sort of a geneticist or scientific division for the Covenant. A species that specialises in intellect rather than combat. Hence, dealing with the weaponization of the Flood is thought to be their forte. Despite the mitigating circumstances of the Covenant releasing the Flood, during the firefight between the UNSC and the Covenant, the place goes dark, but faintly illuminated by the red emergency generated lighting. The facility goes into a Redcon 5 procedure and preserves all power and energy for the countermeasure, the Doom Protocol that will awaken the Oracle of Installation 4, the Monitor, 343 Guilty Spark, and his Sentinels. The darkness doesn't calm the rigorous fight for the control center, however, but what does is the screeching, the snarl of the Flood, echoing and circulating throughout the facility, a sound neither side has heard before. This strikes fear in both sides of the war, as everyone fearfully turns their heads to the origin of the horrific sound. including Captain Keyes, Sergeant Johnson, the Arbiter, Marines, Grunts, Jackals. Everyone's instincts kick in and they stop fighting, even if it's for just a few minutes. With that suspense, we cut away. We don't see what happens, not yet. The elite on the other excavation site is distressed by the commotion he is hearing on the other end, until he loses the connection. We see that Chief was also listening the entire time. Moments later, whilst the elite is distracted and tense, a fragmentation grenade rolls to his feet with no pin. It's too late before he reacts. The elite and nearby grunts are eradicated in a glorious fashion. Although, Chief purposefully keeps the engineer alive. He reaches for his magnum to threaten the engineer, but realizes he doesn't need to. The engineer seems to unseal the door regardless of his orders, insinuating it's a pacifist, a creature that isn't taking sides, but does have a harmless and shrouded agenda. The engineer succeeds, and Master Chief gains access to the control center. The engineer floats away after he's done. Chief approaches the control panel and connects Cortana to the neural network of the installation.
That terminal, try there.
You all right?
Never been better. You can't imagine the wealth of information. The knowledge, so much, so fast. It's glorious.
So, what sort of weapon is it?
Cortana garners all of the mass infusion of generational information about the Halo, the vast history of the universe and the cosmos, surrounding the Forerunner installation in one codex. Even for an artificial intelligence, this strains Cortana's processing power. Cortana is astonished by the magnitude of the intelligence, and what this means for the future war effort. Chief tells her to narrow her mind and find out what Halo's weapon is, and how they can use it to defeat the Covenant. Cortana calls him a barbarian for implying that Halo is nothing but a cudgel. Cortana, in admiration of the majesty and significance of the Halo, says that the Covenant are justified in creating a religion based on it. They were right. The Halo rings are Forerunner technology, artifacts to serve a purpose larger than life itself. Chief pries her to get to the point, asking how it will benefit them in the war, the current war. Cortana tells him that the Halo itself is a weapon. The Forerunners built the Halo as a countermeasure, a catalyst, a doomsday protocol to eliminate a threat, a parasite. Master Chief is bewildered.
Let's stay focused. Halo, how do we use it against the Covenant?
This ring isn't a cudgel, you barbarian. It's something else. Something much more important. The Covenant were right. This ring, it's Forerunner. Give me a second to access. Yes, the Forerunner built this place, what they called a fortress world, in order to... Wait. No, that can't be. Oh, those Covenant fools. They must have known. There must have been signs.
Slow down. You're losing me.
The Covenant found something, buried in this ring, something horrible, and now they're afraid.
Something buried? Where?
The captain. We've got to stop the captain.
Keys? What
The
do
weapons cache he's looking for. It's not really... We can't let him get inside.
I don't understand.
There's no time. Get out of here, find Keys, stop him. Before it's too late!
Cortana turns hysterical. She orders Chief to abscond from the control room and get to the other excavation site in order to save Captain Keyes and the others as soon as possible. It may already be too late. The flood manifests and spreads dauntingly fast. Chief reaches for the Cortana chip to eject it from the control terminal. Cortana urgently tells him not to do that. She needs to learn more of the installation. She says she is only scratching the surface. She yells at him to go. Master Chief double takes, reluctant to leave her. She says they have no choice, and that he should let her do her job, what she was designed and programmed to do. Master Chief tentatively breaks off into a sprint. As Master Chief is scurrying down the tunnels as fast as his augmented agility will allow him, something catches him off guard an unidentified object lurks behind Master Chief. With his acute senses, he notices it. He grabs his assault rifle, and then aims the barrel of his weapon to have it meet the Oracle, 343 Guilty Spark. Before Chief can pull the trigger, he is teleported into the swamp. He ends up in the dim, dusky swamplands. He gets his bearings, then averts to the monitor. 343 apologizes for the abrupt teleportation. He introduces himself as 343 Guilty Spark, monitor of Installation 04, then tells Chief that he requires his assistance for a grave predicament. Here I will end part 2. I'd just like to say that you've probably noticed it's getting harder for me to find visuals that reflect what happens in my adaptation as I stray further away from what happens in the video game. Granted, as a bigger picture, I'm still reasonably sticking to the plot, but most of the scenarios I'm explaining to you for adaptation never happen, so you'll just have to bear with me on that regard in this great journey. Thank you for watching, stay tuned for part 3, and I will see you next time. Until then, goodbye for now. See you later. Arrivederci. Au revoir. Hello everyone, my name is thel Graphical, and welcome to part 3 of my film adaptation of Halo Combat Evolved. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2, you know what to do. We left off with Cortana having just sent Master Chief off to reach the flood infestation in order to save Keyes. Cortana had just discovered that the Halo rings are a countermeasure to combat the flood, and now the flood has been released. 343 Guilty Spark teleports Master Chief to the swamplands. From then on, in a flash, Master Chief is in the dense swamp with 343. Disorientated and dazed, Chief hurls his rifle back up and tells Guilty Spark to identify itself. Guilty Spark tells Chief that he looks to be a formidable combatant and requires his assistance in rectifying the spread of the flood and stopping it from leaving the Halo. Chief asks where they are. 343 tells him they are close to Installation 4's bacterial quarantine containment. Chief demands to know what happened. As a non-answer, Guilty Spark politely asks Chief to follow him, whilst humming and floating away. Chief keeps his assault rifle levelled and his eyes peeled. Chief and Guilty Spark near the entrance to the quarantine zone. Terrified grunts come flowing out, flailing their arms around in hysteria. Chief readies his weapons, about to pull a trigger. When he realises the grunts are unarmed, he puts it down. Guilty Spark assures him that they are no threat to him. They have very different priorities now: to flee from their greatest fear. Guilty Spark leads Chief into the atrium of the complex. The room is desolate, empty, foreboding. The air is tarnished with spore particles. Blood is smeared across the floor, both red from a human and blue from the Covenant. Yet there are no bodies, just the potent sensory vibe of death, war and terror. Chief questions Guilty Spark of what happened. Guilty Spark proclaims that the Covenant, with no regard for containment protocol, have released the flood as a result of their curiosity and religious beliefs. He tells Master Chief of the flood only by name. He doesn't spout a load of exposition. Master Chief questions further about the flood when he loses his train of thought after spotting a Marine's helmet on the floor, painted with blood. Chief picks it up and ejects the chip containing the helmet's cam footage. He inserts it into his heads-up display and watches the playback of the confrontation between Keyes and the Arbiter. It is interrupted by the appearance of the flood. It will have the same tone and intensity as the segment in the video game, but here the circumstance will be different. The arrival of the flood sends both sides of the fight into a frenzy. In the face of the horror, they forget the cause they are fighting for. They are fighting for their very survival, not their generals or deities. We witness the horror from the perspective of the Marine's helmet cam. Marines are being slaughtered around him. Their bodies are consumed by the parasite. and mutate into another soldier in the Flood army. The mutation makes it hard to tell human and alien apart, as they raise the dead of any species and act as marionettes controlled by a host organism. All life in the room is wiped out, but we never see what happens to Keyes or the Arbiter. The last we see is a small Flood in infection form, not unlike a facehugger from Alien, lurch at the Marine and engulf the camera feed. Master Chief then surveys his surroundings, unnerved by what he just saw. Chief asks Guilty Spark where the Flood have gone. Most likely they have gone to the library to reach the index before they can. Guilty Spark tells him the index is the key to activate Halo and eradicate the Flood infestation, and that is why they must reach it before they do. Chief tells him to wait. He refuses teleportation without finding Captain Keyes first. Guilty Spark confirms there are no life signs left in this construct. Chief denies that he can be certain. Guilty Spark makes the point that he is designed to be certain, and to enforce adherence to installation protocol. Guilty Spark claims they will not be outnumbered in the fight for the index. Guilty Spark has Halo's Sentinels at his beck and call. We now cut to the inside of a Phantom, where the Arbiter has once again captured Keyes. Keyes is ill-treated by the Covenant and exhausted from battle. Keyes comments that the Arbiter has saved him from the Flood in vain. He will not expose planet Earth to the Covenant. The Arbiter, however, pledges to get anything he needs out of him, given enough time. Keyes warns the Arbiter that he should be worrying about the Flood in lieu of granting him asylum in his ship. His only chance to find Earth will not live long, to dishonour his species if truth and reconciliation is devoured by the Flood. The Arbiter appreciates his wisdom, then states that once he lays waste to the Flood and escapes from the ring, Captain Keyes will be at the mercy of High Charity, promising that he will suffer lifelong until such time that he complies. The Arbiter travels back to Truth and Reconciliation to support the assault on the Flood. We now enter Cortana's mind as she rummages through the history of the Halo rings, using Installation 4's control center. Considering her astonishment at the breadth of information she accumulates, the severity of the purpose behind the Halo rings, and how vital she makes it out to be, the film will allow us to experience the vast current and surge of ethos Cortana obtains. In order to do this, I'm going to have Cortana viscerally experience the history of the universe firsthand. The scene will feel as though Cortana is living and witnessing through thousands of years in minutes, undergoing the trance on a tactile level. We will use Cortana as a vehicle for exposition in an entertaining manner. This technique of flashback is getting more common as a storytelling device these days. Characters who are typically reading into something that informs a decision they made or make later in the story are presented in such a way as if their embodiment is there. From my memory, I know this was done in Daredevil Season 3, when Wilson Fisk researches Bullseye's family history. Recently, it was used in Joker, when Arthur Fleck shadows over an interview with his mother to discover fragmentations of his past. We will have Cortana appear as a human, the spitting image of Dr. Halsey, instead of the binary hologram she is in actuality. This is because the simulation is of her own making. She will explore the lore of the Halo universe to a restricted and necessary degree, as to visually present to the audience the magnitude of the Halo rings, and why they are so important, and grave in the wrong hands. It will substantiate and justify why the entire franchise itself is centered around the Halo rings, and the title Halo. This will perfectly inform casual audiences of why the film is called Halo. This will be an opportunity for the film to show rather than tell ad nauseum. Narratively, we're on thin ice here. The entire film, along with its stakes and themes, will hinge upon this revelation. With that preface done, let's dive into this sequence. From the beginning, Cortana witnesses the epidemic of the Flood. Thousands upon thousands of them ferally ravaging, residential homes and military bases. She transports through different worlds and societies and witnesses the evolution of the Flood, and the devolution of the humanoid Forerunners. The Forerunners put up a fight. We get a glimpse of the Didact coalescing a Forerunner army, the Prometheans, but receives disapproval and reproach, judging by the body language the Didact receives from the female Forerunner. This feminine figure undergoes the materialization of the Halo rings and cascades them into the void of space, eons apart, in order for the radius of the combined Halo rings to engulf all sentient life, or in this instance the Flood. The Flood have overrun the planets. Cortana sees gargantuan titan-sized Flood monsters mowing down cities and societies as civilizations regress to rubble. The Flood harvest and consume everything in its path. Before her very eyes, the Flood evolves through the life cycle of biology, beginning as feral monsters, to coordinated creatures, and then to interstellar travelers assuming control of technology to spread throughout the galaxy. The Flood become an intelligent species in their own right. They have an ominous, intergalactic presence, and from the looks of the biological war, they will be the only living organism left before long. The parasite has invaded life on a universal scale. Life is on the brink of consisting of only the Flood, until the Forerunners fire the Halo rings. The surge of energy is emanated from each of them. She sees this monumental event from the ground, safe inside the inner terrain of a Halo ring, where humans and other species are safe, whereas outside of the Halo rings, all sentient life is destroyed. And so the Flood are eradicated, with no life forms for the parasite to replenish from. Cortana observes the transition into a new age. She spectates as the Forerunners return each species to respective planets of their own to repopulate the now vacant planets, completely devoid of any sentient life or living organisms. The final piece of imagery is Cortana seeing the dawn of humanity's time on Earth. The ancient cavemen having just been relinquished by the Forerunners and are now free to roam the new planet, gifted to them, Earth, allowing the Homo sapiens with their free will to create a civilization that would one day grow to become the humanity of the present. Her vision proceeds with lightning fast memories of what follows: the Stone Age, medieval times, World War I, World War II, and finally, the war between the UNSC and the Rebel Front, right up until the point she finds herself now, beyond the Fall of Reach, and with the discovery of Installation 4. The execution of this scene is paramount. It will invite the mass audience into the Halo universe. The scene will also demand heed and attention. We are no longer relying on mystery, but establishing the plot and the stakes of the story. Providing this scene is pulled off, through Cortana's eyes, the audience will be able to deduce how and why the Halo rings came to be through visual cues alone. No dialogue whatsoever. They don't exactly need to know who the Didact is or the Librarian. For the sake of brevity, the audience need only be shown, not told, that the Flood were once ubiquitous and had almost spread into a universal dominion. It will be plain to see that the Forerunners forged the Halo array, preserved as many species as possible on the Halo rings, and then fired the rings to wipe out the Flood and any remaining life that would have been their food source, therefore starving the Flood to malnourishment. The Forerunners then planted the species to planets of their own and allowed life to persist naturally. From these visual cues, the audience should be able to comprehend that, and for the plot of Halo: The Pillar of Autumn, that will be enough. It will inform the scene where Cortana discloses the weaponization of Halo and 343 Guilty Spark's ulterior motive. In rapid succession, we have just conveyed to the audience that the Forerunners are an extinct species and the saviour of humanity, and the Halo rings are essentially the equivalent of Noah's Ark on a cosmic scale. Let's recap where we are in the story, shall we? The Master Chief and Guilty Spark are making their way to the library to obtain the index. Chief thinks this will only achieve the goal of merely destroying the Flood alone. Guilty Spark is letting him believe that by the omission of the truth. The Arbiter is returning to truth and reconciliation with Captain Keyes as his captive once again. The Arbiter's plan is to interrogate Keyes for life back in High Charity, as he believes he can break him, or at least someone else can. After all, he is only human. But first, the Covenant need to fight the Flood to cleanse the sacred ring and to fulfill their pledge and allegiance to the prophets of the Covenant. In a cauterizing clash between the Sentinels and the Flood, Guilty Spark materializes in the library along with Master Chief. The nature of the skirmish is the end goal, to get the index first. Now, if you have played the video game, you'll know that 343 inexplicably teleports you at the bottom of the library when the index is on top. As a game mechanic, this is functional, but this would be horrendous and a colossal waste of time in a feature film's runtime, and would quite frankly create a plot hole. Thereby, for the library scene, I'm going to be making some major changes to keep the scene brief. Initially, I'm going to change how the index works. In this film, the activation index will be one of many other indexes that all have their own distinct functions. While the cleansing of the Flood will still be Halo's primary purpose, the vast assortment of other indexes will insinuate that Installation 4 does have other functions. As a result, the library's aesthetic and design will entail hundreds and thousands of activation indexes, but Chief and Guilty Spark are only looking for one, and due to its dominance and significance over the others, the activation index for firing the rings will have its own pedestal and security system. The onslaught in the library will not entail Master Chief fighting through waves and hordes of countless Flood enemy. Instead, when Master Chief enters the battle, the Flood will take note of his combat prowess. The Flood will retreat away towards the index, so Chief still needs to follow them regardless. He and Guilty Spark are equally dumbfounded at the Flood's retreat. Anyhow, when Master Chief arrives at the activation index, they are confronted by a huge and grotesque Flood formation, composed from the amalgamation of Flood units. The Master Chief, with the assistance of Guilty Spark and his Sentinels, work to eliminate the threat that's impeding them from obtaining the index from its storage casket. With a vigorous struggle, they eventually manage to kill the Flood monstrosity by cauterizing it, preventing the infection from spreading and diminishing the integrity of the creature. After they have defeated this foe, they successfully helm the activation index. Here comes another alteration I'm going to make. Instead of having Master Chief being submissive and allowing Guilty Spark to take the index, he will keep it as leverage, as he still doesn't trust Guilty Spark. Guilty Spark cautions him that his organic form renders him to be vulnerable to the infection, to which Chief will respond that he will take his chances, and something along the lines of maybe his armour isn't just a fashion statement. Since 343 Guilty Spark is portrayed as a pragmatic robot, it should know how a human will react upon learning the truth of the Halo array. From its perspective, Master Chief has fulfilled his purpose, so he should abandon him in the library and go to the control center alone without Chief. Which brings me to a big problem I had with the story of Halo 1. The fact that the monitor of Installation 4 does not have jurisdiction to activate the Halo rings is just absurd to me. Think about it. Why would the Forerunners build the monitor of Installation 4, but reserve the right to control the installation to strangers that just stumble upon the ring by happenstance? What if the Flood spread and no so-called Reclaimers were left alive to cleanse the universe? This does not logically follow, and no extended law will change that within the confines of this film and its story. It is reasonable for Guilty Spark to require assistance to combat the Flood so the activation index can be obtained, but the thought of him having to yield control to whoever just happens to be around is insane. In this version of the scene, Master Chief is perceptive, and he foresees that this could very well be the case. Guilty Spark could have been ready to leave Master Chief once the index was safe. In this recontextualization, it would appear that the Master Chief's wisdom, perception and intelligence has saved humanity, instead of being a subservient follower who just follows Guilty Spark's lead. as if Master Chief almost comes across as a player in a video game, you might say. Guilty Spark thought Master Chief to be merely a weapon at his disposal, but miscalculated and did not account for the human and intellect inside Master Chief's power armor. Guilty Spark stipulates to Master Chief's resistance, and wastes no time teleporting himself and the Master Chief back to where they met, Halo's control center, where Cortana has been discovering the true fatal ramifications of firing Installation 4. The Master Chief returns to the control center with Guilty Spark. As he approaches the control panel, Cortana's hologram illuminates from it. She anxiously orders Master Chief to stop in his tracks and stay away from the control panel. Guilty Spark states they must proceed with the reunification of the Index with the core and refers to him as the Reclaimer. Master Chief is perturbed by her demeanor. Cortana warns Chief not to let 343 anywhere near the controls. Guilty Spark is displeased with an AI construct being in Halo's control center. Chief is bewildered and asks Cortana what she's doing. Cortana states she's been scouring through the archives of Halo's history, and has discovered what the installations of the Halo array really do. Cortana asks Chief if he has any idea of what the monitor almost made him do. Master Chief gives the extent of his understanding on Halo's function, to emit a surge of energy that will eliminate the flood. Cortana stipulates to that, and says he's right, but Halo kills the flood by destroying their food source, all sentient life in the universe within each ring's radius effect. That is the only way to destroy the flood parasite, and it's why the Forerunners synthesized Halo, as a measured approach and an alternative to the Promethean army. Guilty Spark tells Chief that's more or less true, and that Installation 4 has a pulse radius effect of 25,000 light years, but once the other installations follow suit, the galaxy will be devoid of life to sustain the flood. Then, like in the game, Cortana says,
Left out that little detail, did he?
Chief's suspicions were well founded. He indicates to Guilty Spark that if they destroy Halo, they could eradicate the flood without as many casualties, to which Guilty Spark replies,
That is absolutely unacceptable.
Cortana picks up movement in the vicinity, sentinels. Guilty Spark turns hostile due to Master Chief's refusal to fire the rings. The Monitor's vocal politeness does not match his physical apparent aggression, as he threatens Chief with the sentinels. Guilty Spark orders his sentinels to dispose of Master Chief. Chief destroys the first sentinel with a charged plasma pistol, then acquires its sentinel beam to finish off the rest.
So be it. Save his head. Dispose of the rest.
Look out!
Chief tells her the library is full of indexes that could allow him to do that, and that he was told there was only one index for that purpose, but he doesn't know what to believe. Cortana concludes that they need to destroy the Halo ring world itself. Cortana recommends using the Pillar of Autumn to destabilize the ring and destroy the integrity of its primary systems. They plan to use a self-destruction sequence on the Pillar of Autumn's fusion reactor to cause an explosion of a large scale in order to do so, and because luck's on their side, Cortana still has her predicted coordinates of where the crash site of the Pillar of Autumn should be, so it's just a matter of getting there. Not to mention that the only person who can initiate the self-destruct sequence is the captain. Their next mission is to find Jacob Keyes. Cortana advises that the Flood are known to harvest ships in order to spread on a galactic scale, and that Truth and Reconciliation would be a formidable host. That is where the Flood must be headed, and that is where the Covenant must be holding Captain Keyes. Over the radio, Master Chief calls for Forehammer, but there's no response. But then he spots a Banshee in the air, doing reconnaissance in the snow biome where the control center was located. With acute accuracy, he lines up a shot with the plasma pistol, and drains the power from the Banshee with a directed hit. Cortana wonders what his plan is. Chief answers her question by leaping onto the Banshee once it is descended low enough, then commandeers it. Piloting the foreign enemy aircraft, Chief boosts off to find Captain Keyes. This marks the end of part 3. Stay tuned for the 4th and final part of Halo: The Pillar of Autumn. Thank you for watching, see you next time. Hello everyone, my name is Delay Graphical, and welcome to the 4th and final part of my adaptation of Halo Combat Evolved from game to film. If you haven't seen the previous parts too, you know what to do. We left off with Chief having set course to the Swamplands in order to save Captain Keyes before the imminent attack from the Flood on the Covenant. The Flood are spreading fast and wide. The infestation is collectively latching onto every conceivable life form that it can find, and this parasite is about to attack and harvest Truth and Reconciliation, along with every life form in it. The Covenant are fending off the Flood, trying to prevent the siege of their supercarrier. The Arbiter's Phantom traverses over this chaos. The scene will feature the formation of the Flood from Halo 3, the ranged attackers that spit projectile acid at their foes. In this instance, when a living being is afflicted with this venom, they are infected with the Flood bacteria. Unfortunately for the Arbiter, a grunt manning a plasma cannon in his Phantom is inflicted with the projectile acid. This causes a ruckus in the Phantom, and then it crashes in the depths of the swamp. A Covenant squadron notices the crashing Phantom and converges to help. When the Phantom has crashed in the swamps, the Flood has begun to infect most of the Covenant on board. The Arbiter acts fast to get him and his prisoner, Captain Keyes, out of the Phantom. The Arbiter makes it out alive. However, the Arbiter loses his prisoner as Captain Jacob Keyes is captured and consumed by the Flood. Wailing in terror, Keyes is carried away by the Flood. The Arbiter fires his plasma rifle in a dire attempt to save Keyes, but it's hopeless. The Arbiter's zealots come to his rescue and ask why he is trying to save the heretic. The Arbiter is feeling a great sense of self-loathing and pity in this moment. He has failed to keep his prisoner, and has allowed the key to finding out the coordinates to Earth to go free from his grasp. With no other alternative but to flee, the Arbiter retreats to Truth and Reconciliation, with the location of Captain Keyes now a mystery to everyone, except from the being they will soon call Demon. The Master Chief's Banshee has made it to the Swamplands. He detects Keyes' location by tracking his chip and has triangulated the position somewhere in the vicinity. Chief surveys the area once he has landed. Then, to his dismay, Master Chief stumbles upon Captain Keyes. He has been harvested by the Flood. His carcass has been infused into a Flood organism, yet he is still breathing consciously. The visual horror will mirror the imagery present in the game, the only difference being the change in the setting. Chief puts Keyes out of his misery, but not by maliciously, brutally punching his face through. I always thought it was a bit sadistic in the game and way over the top, so in my adaptation, Keyes begs him to end the pain and not let the Covenant find Earth, or the Flood leave Halo. Chief makes him that promise and ends his life in a more surgical manner, perhaps. Anything but literally punching his face in. Something a bit more dignified and pleasant. Even a bullet to the head would be an improvement. Then, with sorrow, Cortana tells him to retrieve Keyes' chip, as they will need it to initiate the self-destruct sequence in the Pillar of Autumn. Chief also retrieves his UNSC dog tags, saying that he will give them to Miranda Keyes, his daughter, who is currently elsewhere in the galaxy. Cortana tells Chief they have to go before the Pillar of Autumn is consumed by the Flood. Upon examination, Cortana indicates that instead of immediately harvesting Keyes, it seems like the Flood have connected to him via brain stems. It's therefore possible that this Flood organism now knows the location to Earth, which means they cannot let them off this ring. She also predicts that the Flood may be going to the Pillar of Autumn to learn more of humanity and the far-reaching colonies in the galaxy. With this notion, Chief and Cortana are eager to get back on the Banshee and return to the Pillar of Autumn. The Flood are rapidly evolving into intelligible beings, and before long, as Cortana proclaims, a grave mind could manifest from beneath the installation's soil. Meanwhile, outside Truth and Reconciliation, the Covenant is struggling through great turmoil to resist the Flood. That is until a fleet of Sentinels eviscerate the Flood, thus rescuing the remaining Covenant. After a successful defense, Truth and Reconciliation is safe for now. The Arbiter asks 343 what he is. 343 tells him he is the monitor of this installation. At that, the Arbiter shows his admiration and respect for Guilty Spark. The Arbiter utters the byname the Covenant refer to the monitors as in their mythology, the Oracle. The Oracle presses on. His words scream urgency, but his tone is the usual content and calm attitude. He informs the Arbiter that the Reclaimer of the Index seeks to destroy this installation. He knows not how he intends to do it, but that he is adamant to destroy it all the same. The Oracle then asks the Covenant for help. As a collective force, with his Sentinels, they can save Installation 4 from obliteration. The Arbiter reckons that the Heretic will use the Pillar of Autumn as a means to destroy the Ringworld. He recalls UNSC frigates having self-destruct protocols to deprive them from the coordinates to their human colonies. With that, he reminds himself of his recent failure, yet it doesn't demoralise him. It makes him all the more ferocious and motivates him to amend his blasphemy and irreverence by securing the everlasting fate of the sacred rings. At this moment in the story, we have transitioned into the thick of the third act, the ultimate conflict that will dictate the fate of Installation 4, and thus the entire galaxy going forward. Unbeknownst to Master Chief and Cortana, the Covenant and the Guilty Spark are on their way as a synergized force to the Pillar of Autumn. Not to mention that it's in the Flood's best interest to stop Chief from igniting the Pillar, for the sake of the Parasite's survival, and their campaign to infest the galaxy. All-out war is about to erupt. Thereby, this accentuates the overwhelming pressure on Serial 117, John, the Master Chief. He is striving to disable a weapon with the potential to annihilate all sentient life, and every faction on the Ringworld has one common goal: stopping him. Master Chief is fraught about the consequences of him failing this mission. As he makes his way to the Banshee, Forehammer lands with a Pelican with Sergeant Johnson and the bare minimum of Marines left alive. Chief vehemently denies their assistance and tells them to get off Halo and back to Earth whilst the Covenant are distracted. He stresses that this isn't up for discussion, there's no time. They all stipulate to that apart from Forehammer. Forehammer refuses to leave and tells Chief that she will be his ride out of the Pillar of Autumn before it explodes. Forehammer is sure that it is her duty to do so, and it's why she is a pilot, to put combatants in the direction of fire and rescue them before they burn. Master Chief thanks her for her devotion to the mission. He then orders Sergeant Johnson to abandon Installation 4, with the remark, "That's an order, Sergeant." John has finally accepted his position as the Master Chief, and the honour and responsibility of leading this fight. After scouring the terrain for Installation 4, the Pelican has discovered the crash site for the Pillar of Autumn. Although they are not the first to arrive, below them the Flood are sprawling across the land towards the Pillar. This is the least of their worries, however. Behind them, Cortana detects hostiles inbound on their airspace. Sure enough, an armada of Phantoms and Banshees are boosting to them from the distance. They open fire on the Pelican. Forehammer's main concern is getting the Master Chief in the Pillar of Autumn. She does so with great difficulty. Trying to evade projectiles from incoming fire, Forehammer descends the Pelican down to the top of the pillar, close enough for Chief to jettison himself out and land on top. If not for him being a superhuman with advanced power armor, the fall would have certainly killed him, but Master Chief scarcely survives his desperate leap of faith as Forehammer zooms off, away from the Pillar of Autumn by order of the Chief himself. Once Chief is done, he will need her to return for his evacuation. As the Flood breach the Pillar of Autumn, the Covenant enter inside the hangars. Chief enters from above its ventilation systems. For this finale, my overall goal is to cut down this part of the story, where in the video game counterpart, there would be an abundance of corridor combat for days on end. In avoidance to have this piece of story appear as a repeat of the first clash in the Pillar at the start of the film, I will utilise the element of the Flood to give this finale an overall horrific, desperate and rampant tone. With the dynamic of Master Chief versus the Covenant, and the Sentinels and the Covenant versus the Flood, I will try to up the ante in terms of scale to give the impression that this is the climactic event that will pave the way for the future of the Halo universe, and encapsulate the importance of the Halo array. The Master Chief's objective here is to make it to the bridge controls panel, but first he has an infestation of the Flood and a battalion of the Covenant to get through first. Luckily for him, the Covenant and the Flood are fighting among themselves. Master Chief sneaks through the silent ventilation shafts on the opposite side of the ferocious conflict. The Flood screeches, and the plasma outbursts faintly echo and ricochet across the ship. Chief, keeping his eyes peeled and his assault rifle levelled, makes his way through the dark, dimly lit ship. Every so often he is attacked by the Flood, step by step. Then he enters the chaos of the conflict. He encounters Flood creatures that have ingrown from the corpses of elites. Eventually he arrives at the bridge. Chief connects Cortana to the mainframe so she can initiate the self-destruct sequence, when it is cancelled by Guilty Spark.
I'm afraid that's out of the question, really.
Oh, hell.
Ridiculous! That you would imbue a warship's AI with such a wealth of knowledge? Weren't you worried it might be captured? Or destroyed?
He's in my data arrays, a local tab.
You can't imagine how exciting this is! To have a record of all of our lost time! Human history, is it? Fascinating.
The Sentinels emerge from the window in front of Master Chief along with his Sentinels. Guilty Spark demands that he hands over the AI construct in possession of the Index. Master Chief responds by aiming his assault rifle at the Sentinels, at which point the Arbiter appears behind Master Chief. Chief is trapped by both of his newfound foes. Chief equips a shotgun and trains it at the Arbiter. Cortana has a plan to get Chief out of the situation, and tells him to delay them. The Arbiter expresses his distaste for Chief's intentions to destroy the Sacred Ring. Chief replies that that's true, but what's also true is that the Halo Rings were made to disintegrate all sentient life in the galaxy. The Arbiter, with his blind religion and anger clouding his judgment, refuses to take any of Chief's words with face value. The Arbiter marks him a dishonest heretic, a demon in disguise. Chief insists he's telling the truth, grasping at straws to delay the confrontation for as long as possible. The Oracle, Guilty Spark, assures the Arbiter that the purpose of the Halo is of a sanctimonious nature, if he says so himself. The Arbiter pronounces that he has lost enough zealots because of their escapade after the glassing of Planet Reach, claiming the humans are unable to learn the consequences of their heresy. Then thel, vadam, the Arbiter, equips 2 plasma rifles in each hand and trains them both at Master Chief. Before he fires, the Sentinels are wiped out from an airstrike from Fohammer's Pelican. With the odds evened, Master Chief advances on the Arbiter. Chief and the Arbiter procedurally fight to the death through the Pillar of Autumn. Their combat finesse and training are a perfect match for each other. Both have suffered and endured through being moulded into the lethal combatants they are, and now the parallel warriors, from mirrored but different worlds, are going toe to toe. Eventually, Chief manages to lose the Arbiter when they are lost in the fray of the Flood and must defend for themselves. Chief inquires about the anti-tank arsenal. Cortana answers the armory is on lockdown in accordance to breach protocol. Chief tells her to open it on his command. Cortana says striking phantoms isn't exactly their priority right now. Chief then questions if a well-placed rocket could destroy the Pillar of Autumn's fusion reactor. Cortana immediately understands what he is gunning for. We jump cut to Chief gaining access to the arsenal and acquiring a UNSC ballistic rocket launcher and some fragmentation grenades for good measure. We arrive at the Pillar's engine room. With great urgency, Master Chief enters the room. Cortana has access to all the fusion reactor schematics and procedures. Cortana walks Chief through the procedure. Chief goes to the terminals and operates the fusion reactor. Cortana tells him to pull back the exhaustion and ventilation couplings that will expose a shaft that leads to the primary fusion driver, leaving it vulnerable to ballistic and explosive damage. The eruption that the failure of the reactor will cause should be enough to destroy Halo, according to Cortana. Chief follows her instruction, but before he can expose the shaft, Guilty Spark descends behind him and zaps the rocket launcher from his grasp. With Chief flustered and disorientated, the Arbiter strikes him from behind. Chief is distracted by his mission whilst engaging in ruthless hand-to-hand combat with the Arbiter. The Arbiter is on the offense with a new energy sword, but Chief continuously evades his attacks. Chief briefly incapacitates the Arbiter. In time, he opens the couplings and exposes the reactor's shaft. Chief opens fire on the Arbiter single-handedly with his trusty assault rifle. With the other, he pings the pin on his fragmentation grenade, removing the pin with his thumb. While the Arbiter is hampered by suppressive fire, Chief hurls the grenade with superb accuracy into the fusion reactor's primary driver. The Arbiter averts to it with distress, then rears his reptilian head to Master Chief with fury in his venomous eyes. Chief has emptied the clip in his rifle. The fusion reactor explodes, and the entire engine facility goes on red alert. Chief tells the Arbiter it's done, it's over. The Arbiter lashes out, chastising the exhausted and wounded Master Chief. The Arbiter brutalizes Chief and cracks his visor. Guilty Spark, the monitor of the Halo, recognizes that Installation 4 is doomed to its demise. The Oracle absconds from the area nonchalantly. His failure has not deterred him. The Arbiter, on the other hand, explodes with anxiety and is irate. He lays into Master Chief and depletes his power armor's shields. Cortana yells in anguish at Chief to get him to evade the aggressor. The Flood swarm into the engine room. The emergence of the parasite diverts the Arbiter's attention, giving Chief the opportunity to bolt to a fire escape door. Chief trudges through it, then seals the door between him and the Arbiter, barely making it out alive, trapping the Arbiter with the remaining Flood. Before we cut away from the Arbiter, we watch through the door's tight window as he equips the rocket launcher in one hand and wields the energy sword in the other, before taking on what's left of the Flood. That will be the last we see of the Arbiter in this film, leaving us, the audience, with the aftertaste of his greatest failure and his implied punishing struggle to escape the ring with his life, only to be welcomed back to high charity in Halo 2 with hatred and disdain. But of course, we don't know any of that as of yet. Cortana contacts Forehammer and tells Chief to get to the hangar pronto. Forehammer is distressed over the radio and yelps that her Pelican is compromised by the Flood. Chief arrives at the hangar and watches as Forehammer makes a harsh landing. Forehammer wails in terror down the comms. Chief readies his magnum sidearm at the Pelican as he paces to it. Forehammer emerges, trudging from the Pelican. The parasite has latched onto her, and she is undergoing the grotesque transformation into the Flood army. She asks Chief to kill her with the pistol, and take her body back to Earth, before the Flood takes control of her. With sorrow, Chief thanks Forehammer for her service and assistance, and shoots a bullet through her torso where the Flood infection was spreading. Chief catches her body before she collapses and carries her onto the Pelican. With a swarm of Flood looming towards the Pelican, Chief turns on the engine and ignites the thrusters.
We're cutting it close!
Here we go.
The Pelican shoots out the hangar bay of the Pillar of Autumn. Chief exits the Halo's atmosphere and re-enters the black void of space. With a shred of time left, the Pillar of Autumn detonates behind him, and the sacred Halo ring is destroyed. Chief shuts down the engines to reserve fuel whilst drifting in space. Chief goes to the window to observe the destruction of Installation 4. Chief asks Cortana if anyone else made it. Cortana scans for life forms in the area. She says there is only dust and echoes, no sentient life. but she says there were escape pods still vacant before the detonation. But her connection with the pillar is now fried and she doesn't know if they were used. Chief wonders if they would have made it to the escape pods without being thwarted by the flood. Cortana states they very well could have. Chief pronounces that it's safe to assume that thel vadam escaped. They should assume that the Covenant will hear of this. The annihilation of one of their treasured rings will surely be seen as humanity declaring war on the Covenant. Cortana exclaims that they did what they had to do for the security of planet Earth and the rest of the human colonies. An entire Covenant armada obliterated along with the flood. Master Chief queries her by saying, "But?" Cortana reaffirms that Installation 4 was just one piece of the Halo array. Master Chief states,
I think we're just getting started.
This marks the end of my film adaptation of Halo Combat Evolved, under the new title of Halo The Pillar of Autumn. I would very much like you to comment down below if you disagreed with any of the creative decisions I made in this video, and what you would do differently. Remember, I haven't just spent millions of dollars making this. This is just my pitch. The purpose of this video series is to spark discussion on how film adaptations could be successful, so that if they were ever to be made, the audience has already voiced what they would like to see. If you've stuck around for all the parts in this video, thank you very much, I really appreciate it. You can fully expect more episodes of Game to Film in the future. I will be delaying the Halo 2 and Halo 3 episodes until they are out on PC, so I can get the best footage possible. In the meantime, I will be covering other games which I can't wait to delve into. Thank you for watching, see you next time.